Bang! Hey, what's going on, guys? Shane here, HomeBizNetworks.com, bringing you another book review video. In this video, this is part 2 of maybe a 3-part book series. In this video, I am discussing this book here. Alright? Opening the Closed Guard, okay, the story behind the film, Robert Drysdale, the origins of Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil. Alright, so if you haven't seen it, part 1 is below, share that below. Guys, it's taken me a while to get to the second edition of this book because I came across some other projects. And so, alright, right here, Opening the Closed Guard, okay, by Robert Drysdale. Alright, long story short, Robert Drysdale went on a mission to talk about and discuss the origins of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, and this book is the behind the scenes of the making of the documentary. What's really interesting about this book is that it has interviews. What's really good about this book, okay, is that pretty much Robert Drysdale and his team traveled around and interviewed top judo and jiu-jitsu practitioners in Brazil in the early 20s, 30s, and 40s. And it's pretty much, this book is full of interviews, Q&As, and then the behind the stories of how he met those individuals, right? So, hold on, let me just get to the first chapter so you guys can see here, like one of the chapters. Alright, so here, as you guys can see, right, see some of the pages, okay? And then in this part, right, he goes into what happened to meet this individual, and then on the next couple pages, you'll see a series of questions, okay? You know, like for instance, he is talking to, let's go over here. So I can't pronounce some of these Brazilian names really. I pronounce Portuguese names very poorly, so I am very sorry for bad mouthing some of these names or mispronunciations. But let's see here. So this is a legend, Oswaldo, right? Okay. And for instance, he goes on to talk about, you know, some of the questions he asks Oswaldo is, can you introduce yourself? When and why did you begin to train judo? What were the biggest names at the time? Can you tell us about Takeo Yano? Do you condemn these fixed fights? Any final thoughts? Okay, and then he talks about his story when he gets into Rio de Janeiro, and this is where I am about the book, okay? And what's interesting about this book is that he doesn't just interview, you know, Brazilians. He goes to the Kodokan in Japan, okay? Oh, God, this book is a must read. I love this book. This book is amazing, okay? See some more photos, all right? So, pretty much, when I first started to go through this book, I learned a lot about Helio and the founding fathers of Jiu-Jitsu, and some of the content it's not the typical information that you hear all over the place on the origins of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is great about this book. And I'm learning a lot. So I started to think about some of the founders of Jiu-Jitsu and think that they were frauds because of the stories that they made up, right? But now that I'm deeper in the book, I'm starting to see certain trends on why there were fixed fights, okay? And why the stories originated. Back then, there wasn't so much of a hierarchy with belt structure, okay? A lot of people didn't know about Jiu-Jitsu and fighting arts, so pretty much these legends, they had to do these fixed fights in carnivals to spread knowledge of Jiu-Jitsu. So, you know, there are some legends who did have fixed fights in carnivals to spread the words, and then some real fights, okay? let's see what else is very, very shocking. Let's see, I'm halfway through, and one thing is very interesting on how the story of jiu-jitsu goes way deeper than, this one guy, very small, frail, learns from his brothers, passes on to his family, right? It's way more than that, okay? And it's way more than just Maeda teaching everybody in Brazil, okay? There was a lot more legends in Brazil in the 40s, in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. I think they say the first Gracie school was sometime in the 20s, I think the book says. I'll have to go back and find that. The story of jiu-jitsu is quite interesting. Halfway through the book, he starts talking about why, how do I explain this? Why it shifts from, you learn pretty much how it breaks off from, like Kodokan Japanese judo, and how it slowly starts transitioning into, Valley Tudo jiu-jitsu fights, right? And it starts breaking down why jiu-jitsu looks the way it looks and why judo looks the way it looks, okay? Because believe it or not, the two arts are same techniques. As much as many people don't want to admit it, judo and jiu-jitsu is the same thing. The specialty is different. Okay, so judo focuses on stand-up, and jiu-jitsu focuses on the ground. Okay, but both arts originated from Japanese jiu-jitsu. So I know I don't get too deep into the content of the book, but pretty much the book starts off with interviews, right? And you go, oh my God, Helio Gracie's been lying all this time. Carlos Gracie, they're lying all the time. But as you go deeper in the book, you get a bigger understanding on the hows and whys, of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And what's pretty funny is how most of these legends, you hear the same sort of tinkling through them about, obviously jiu-jitsu is the same as judo. Obviously we know jiu-jitsu comes from judo, okay? It's very interesting to hear these legends, these martial arts legends, talk about their training and the history of their schools and why they train the way they train. Guys, this is Opening the Closed Guard. This is part 2. I think I'm going to do a part 3 and part 4 and kind of sum up the whole book for you guys. If you haven't seen it, check out part 1. Guys, my name's Shane, HomeBizNetworks.com, bringing you another jiu-jitsu book review. Thanks for checking me out.